My boss took my wife, my job, and my kids. Then my dead uncle left me a locked briefcase with $60,000 cash and a secret address. The morning my boss fired me, he was wearing my wife's perfume. I noticed it the second I walked into his office. That specific scent. Lavender with something warm underneath it. The kind that cost $180 a bottle. The kind I had been buying Lauren for 6 years. It reached me before anything else did. Before the words. Before the HR folder sitting on the corner of his desk with my name printed on the tab. Before the expression on his face, the one trying so hard to look professional but failing at the edges. Because underneath it, there was something else. Something close to satisfaction. Nathan Derek Calloway said, gesturing toward the chair across from him, "Sit down." So I sat. I had been working at Calloway Capital Group for 9 years. 9 years of being the first one in and the last one out. 9 years of closing deals that built Derek's reputation while his name stayed on the building directory. 9 years of believing loyalty meant something in that business. "We're restructuring the investment division," Derek said. "Your position is being eliminated." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a termination letter, an NDA, and a severance offer. 3 months of salary in exchange for my silence and my signature. 3 months. For 9 years. Effective when I asked. Today. I looked at him for a long moment. I looked at the silver cufflinks I recognized because Lauren had picked them out at a store in the Gold Coast last Christmas. I looked at the faint lavender scent still hanging in the air between us. I looked at the practiced blankness of his expression. "Okay," I said. I signed the folder, stood up, and walked out of an office I had spent nearly a decade helping build, without saying another word. My name is Nathan Briggs. I am 41 years old, and for most of my adult life, I thought I understood how the world worked. You worked hard. You stayed loyal. You built something with your hands, your time, and your sweat. Eventually, I thought all of that added up to a life worth living. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois. My father, Gordon Briggs, worked 30 years at a machine parts factory. My mother, Patricia, worked the early shift at a hospital cafeteria until her knees gave out. We were not poor. We just never had anything extra. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I earned a business degree from the University of Illinois, working nights at a call center to pay for it. I moved to Chicago at 23 with $2,000 and a determination that felt like armor back then. That was where I met Derek Calloway. He was 35 at the time, already running a mid-sized investment consulting firm on the 22nd floor of a building on North Wacker Drive. He was smart, magnetic, and the kind of man who made you feel important just by paying attention to you. He hired me as a junior analyst. Within 4 years, I was running his institutional accounts division. Within 7, I was bringing in clients whose names you would recognize from the business pages. Somewhere along the way, I introduced him to my wife. Lauren and I had met in Lincoln Park at a fundraiser for a children's literacy program she helped run. She was a nonprofit program director with dark hair and a way of laughing at herself that made everyone in the room feel comfortable. We got married in 2017 in Galena, about 3 hours west of Chicago. Our daughter Vivian came 2 years later. Our son Cooper arrived 18 months after that. By the time I walked into Derek's office that October morning, Vivian was 4 and Cooper was 2. I believed, genuinely believed, that my life was moving in one direction. I had no idea it had already been rerouted. The first thing I did after leaving Calloway Capital was call Lauren. She did not answer. I called twice more on my walk to the parking garage. Nothing. Then I sent a text. "I just got fired. On my way home. We need to talk." She read it. I could see the 2 check marks turn blue. She did not respond. I drove home to our house in Wilmette, a quiet suburb north of Chicago, with good schools, wide sidewalks, and neighbors who waved from their driveways. We had bought that house 4 years earlier, a 4-bedroom colonial on a tree-lined street. To me, it had always felt like physical proof that everything I had worked for had finally added up to something. Lauren's car was in the driveway. I went inside. The house was quiet. The kids' shoes were piled by the front door the way they always were. Someone had left a juice cup on the kitchen counter with a sticky ring of apple juice around the base. Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone face down in front of her. She was wearing the kind of expression I had seen before, controlled, prepared, like she had been rehearsing. "Nathan," she said, "I was going to tell you this weekend." "Tell me what?" She did not look away. That was one thing about Lauren. She had never been a coward about the hard things. Even this she delivered straight. "I've been seeing Derek for 8 months," she said. "I'm in love with him. I want a divorce." 8 months. I stood in the doorway of my own kitchen and did the math without meaning to. 8 months ago was February. February was when Lauren had started going to a women's wellness retreat one weekend a month. February was when Derek had started scheduling our one-on-one meetings later in the day, always ending them early with some vague excuse about a dinner commitment. February was when I had noticed Lauren laughing differently at dinner parties, freer and louder, like she was performing for someone. I had filed it under stress, under the ordinary friction of a busy life with 2 small children and demanding careers. "The kids I managed. I want primary custody," she said. "You can see them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings." She kept going. "Derek and I are planning to—" "Don't," I said. "Don't say his name to me right now." She did not. But she did not stop either. She laid it out like a business plan. The custody arrangement, the division of assets, the fact that she had already spoken to a lawyer. She was thorough. She had had 8 months to prepare. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, listening to the sound of the house I was already losing. The divorce moved fast. Lauren had a powerful attorney and the considerable resources of Derek Calloway standing behind her. Mine was competent, but he was outmatched. The judge awarded Lauren primary residence in the Wilmette house, primary physical custody of Vivian and Cooper, and child support at a level that would consume 60% of what I would make if I found comparable work. And finding comparable work was going to be its own battle. I had signed the NDA. Derek had quietly let it be known in our professional circle that I had been let go for performance issues. He did not need to shout it. Men like Derek understand how to poison a room with a whisper. Within 90 days of that October morning, I had no job, no home, and no daily access to my children. My friend Tyler Marsh ran a small IT consulting firm in Evanston, and he let me sleep on his couch for 3 weeks. Tyler is a good man. He did not ask too many questions. After that, I found a room in a shared house in Rogers Park on the north side of Chicago. 4 guys in their late 20s, a bathroom with questionable grout, a neighborhood that smelled like lakefront wind and Jamaican takeout. I was 41 years old, paying $650 a month for a room the size of a generous parking space. The texts from Lauren during that period were businesslike and brief. Schedule confirmations, updates on the kids' doctor appointments. Necessary details delivered without warmth. Once entirely unprompted, she wrote, "Derek and I are taking Vivian and Cooper to Florida next month, just so you know." I read that message standing in the Rogers Park kitchen, holding a mug of cold coffee. I did not answer for 2 days. Then, one night in January, 4 months after everything had fallen apart, I got a text from a number I did not recognize. Just 9 words. "You'll die broke and lonely. You deserve this, Nathan." I sat with that message for a long time. I did not know for certain who sent it. I had my suspicions, but what I remember most about that moment is what happened after the anger passed. Eventually, it did pass. What remained underneath was quieter and more dangerous, a kind of numbness, the feeling of a man who has run out of things to lose. That feeling, I would later understand, is exactly when life decides to surprise you. Raymond Briggs was my father's younger brother, 17 years younger, which made him only 8 years older than me. He was the kind of uncle who showed up twice a year, with a tan, stories that sounded slightly too good to be true, and a way of looking at you like he was reading something just beneath the surface. He had left Rockford at 18 and gone west. California, Nevada, Texas, Colorado. Nothing ever fully settled around him. Real estate, energy consulting, things he was vague about when people asked. He never married. He had no children. He sent birthday cards with $50 folded inside until I was well into my 30s, then switched to calling. He died in November of the year before my marriage fell apart. A heart attack in his rented house in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was 55. His lawyer told my father he had left behind a modest estate, some personal belongings, a used pickup truck, and a storage unit in Cicero, Illinois that he had been renting for 11 years. At the time, I was in the middle of the worst stretch of my life, and I forgot about it. Then, in February, the same month I got that anonymous text, my father called. "Nathan, you remember that storage unit of Raymond's? I remember you mentioning it. I need you to go out there and clear it. The facility's been sending notices. They say if nobody pays the outstanding balance by the end of the month, they're going to auction off the contents. Dad, I said I'm barely keeping my head above water right now." "I know, son." There was a long pause. My father was not a man who used many words, but he knew how to make the ones he used count. "But Raymond always had a soft spot for you," he said. "Of all the family, you were the one he asked about. I think he'd want you to be the one to go." The Midwest Storage Solutions facility on South Laramie Avenue in Cicero was the kind of place that looks exactly like what it is. A long row of corrugated metal doors under fluorescent lighting, the smell of dust and old cardboard, and a security gate that required a code Raymond had apparently given my father years ago. My father had written the code on a post-it note he found in his desk drawer. Unit 114. I drove out there on a Thursday morning in late February. It was one of those gray Chicago area winter days when the sky is the same color as the parking lot. I had nowhere particular to be. I had $72 in my checking account. I had a scheduled call with my divorce attorney that afternoon about why my visitation with Vivian and Cooper needed to be adjusted because of a scheduling conflict on Lauren's end. I was not in a great place. The lock on Unit 114 was a heavy combination padlock, and the code my father had given me did not work on the first 3 tries. Raymond's birthday backward, he had said, March 4th, 1968. So, 869-1403. I stood there in the cold, fingers numb, feeling vaguely ridiculous. On the 4th try, it clicked open. I lifted the metal door. The unit was about 10 feet wide by 15 feet deep. Shelving units along both walls held labeled plastic bins, tax records, camping gear, tools, automotive supplies. A rolled-up Turkish rug leaned in one corner. A few cardboard boxes were stacked in the middle, marked in Raymond's handwriting with categories like books and miscellaneous kitchen. At first glance, it was unremarkable. The accumulated stuff of a man who moved around a lot and kept things he was not sure he would need. But on the back wall, sitting on a lower shelf between a bin of extension cords and a folded winter jacket, was a hard-sided briefcase. Black, aluminum framed, the kind with a combination lock built into each latch. Taped to the top, in Raymond's handwriting, was a single piece of paper with one name on it. Nathan. Not my father's name, not a general label. Mine. My name. I stood there looking at it for a long time. The cold from the concrete floor came up through my shoes. My breath made small clouds in the air. Then, I reached for it. The combination for the briefcase latches was the same as the unit lock. Raymond's birthday backward. This time, they clicked open on the first try. Inside was a padded interior divided into 2 sections. On the left side was money, stacks of it, $100 bills wrapped in paper currency bands from a Nevada bank, each band labeled $10,000. I counted 6 stacks without picking them up. $60,000. On the right side was a manila envelope, a folded piece of paper, and a round-trip plane ticket, the kind you print from a home printer. The destination was Scottsdale, Arizona. The departure date was 3 days from then. I unfolded the piece of paper first. The handwriting was Raymond's, slightly right-leaning, economical, the penmanship of a man who wrote quickly and did not circle his eyes. Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I set this up in case something happened to me before I got a chance to explain things in person. I should have told you years ago. I was waiting for the right moment, and I ran out of time the way people do. The $60,000 is travel money, living money, a buffer while you figure out the next step. Don't overthink it, just use it. The real story is in Scottsdale. The address is in the envelope. When you get there, introduce yourself to the woman named Sandra Cole. She's been expecting you, in a way, for about 20 years. She'll explain what I couldn't. Everything I built for a reason. You'll understand when you see it. You were always the one in the family who was going to do something real, Nathan. I knew it when you were 12 years old, and you were the only one who asked me a question I couldn't answer. I didn't forget that. Take the flight. Go to the address. Listen to what Sandra tells you. Raymond. I sat down on the floor of the storage unit with the letter in my hand and read it twice more. Around me, the fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere deeper in the facility, a metal door rattled closed. $60,000. A plane ticket. An address in Scottsdale. My uncle, who had died 14 months earlier, had left me a message in a briefcase inside a storage unit in Cicero, Illinois. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. I stared at the $72.18 in my checking account. Then I looked at the 6 stacks of hundreds. Then I picked up the plane ticket. I know what some people would think. This could have been money from something no one wanted to know about, a trap. Raymond's idea of a strange joke. I thought all of those things. I sat on that freezing floor for 45 minutes. By the time I stood up, my legs had gone numb. But here is what I kept coming back to. Raymond had been the one person in my family who seemed to see me clearly. Not the version my parents were proud of. Not the version Derek Calloway had used for 9 years. Something closer to the truth of who I actually was. And he had waited in whatever form a dead man can wait for the moment when I had nothing left to lose. I thought about Vivian and Cooper. I thought about Cooper grabbing my collar with both hands when I tried to put him down. I thought about Vivian, who had started asking why Daddy did not live in her house anymore, and then had stopped asking because she had figured out the question made everyone sad. I took the money. I took the letter. I took the ticket. 3 days later, I flew to Scottsdale. The address in the envelope led me to a residential neighborhood in North Scottsdale, near the McCormick Ranch area. Wide streets, low desert landscaping, houses behind stucco walls with terracotta roof lines. It was not flashy in a Vegas way. It was the kind of wealthy that does not need to announce itself. The house at the specific address was substantial. A gated property with a paved circular driveway, olive trees along the perimeter wall, and the particular silence of a place with serious square footage. I rang the intercom at the gate. "Who is it?" a woman's voice asked, measured, alert. "My name is Nathan Briggs," I said. "I'm Raymond Briggs' nephew. I found a letter he left me with this address." A pause. A long one. "How long ago did you find the letter?" 3 days, I said. "I came as soon as I could." Another pause. "Come to the front door." The gate buzzed open. Sandra Cole was 63 years old, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back from a face that had clearly been striking in youth and had settled into something even more interesting with age. Composed. Watchful. The face of someone who had made difficult decisions and lived with them. She wore a linen shirt and reading glasses pushed up on her head. She looked at me the way my uncle's letter had warned me she might, like she had been expecting me, but not quite like this. "You look like him," she said, "around the eyes." People had said that before. She led me through a house that was full of art, serious art. Not decorative pieces, but paintings and sculptures that clearly came from somewhere and meant something. We sat in a room that opened to a courtyard with a fountain in it, and the particular quality of light Scottsdale has in the afternoon, gold and slightly theatrical. Sandra poured coffee without asking if I wanted it and sat across from me. "Raymond told me if anything happened to him, he'd get a message to you eventually," she said. "He said you'd find the unit. He was right about most things." "What was Raymond to you?" I asked. "Business partner," she said, "for 23 years." She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "And a long time ago, before any of the business, he was the first person who ever believed I could build something serious." What Sandra Cole told me over the next 3 hours rearranged my understanding of my uncle's life completely. Raymond had left Rockford at 18, not because he was running from something the way the family had always half assumed, but because he was running towards something specific. He met Sandra in Las Vegas in 1993, when she was a 27-year-old commercial property analyst, and he was a 25-year-old kid with no formal credentials, but an extraordinary instinct for undervalued land. Together, over 2 decades, they built a private real estate holding company called Clearwater Land Partners. It was not flashy. It was not public. It was not the kind of name that showed up in business magazines. It was the kind of company that bought large tracts of land in the path of development 10 years before the development arrived, held them patiently, and sold at the right moment. They had done it repeatedly, in Nevada, in Arizona, in parts of Colorado and New Mexico that nobody was paying attention to, until suddenly everyone was. Raymond never wanted recognition, Sandra said. He specifically didn't want anyone in his family to know the scale of it. He said rich relatives ruin families. He'd seen it. She smiled slightly when she said that. "What's the scale of it?" I asked. Sandra set down her coffee mug. Clearwater Land Partners' current portfolio, after the sale of the Maricopa County holdings last year, has a net asset value of approximately $112 million. I heard the number. I understood each word individually. Together, they did not immediately compute. Raymond's ownership stake was 43%, Sandra continued. He revised his will 18 months before he died. The entirety of his stake passes to you, Nathan. We've been in a legal holding pattern waiting for you to appear, because Raymond's instructions specified that the beneficiary had to come here in person after finding the letter before any transfer could be initiated. I sat in that sunlit room in Scottsdale, with a fountain making soft noise in the courtyard, and tried to understand that my uncle, the man who sent $50 birthday cards and showed up twice a year with a tan and vague stories, had been quietly building a fortune for 2 decades, and without telling anyone, he had decided to leave it to me. "Why me?" I asked. "He had other family." Sandra looked at me for a moment. "He said you were the only one who would know what to do with it," she said. "Not spend it, build with it." She paused. "He said the rest of the family would be comfortable, and then ruined in about 4 years." She paused again. "He also said you were going to need it." That last sentence stayed with me. Raymond had not known the details, of course. He had died before my marriage fell apart, before Derek fired me, before I slept on Tyler's couch, before the Rogers Park room and the anonymous text and the cold coffee in the shared kitchen. But somehow he had understood that my life was constructed on foundations that could shift. He had made sure that when they did, there would be something waiting. I did not tell anyone immediately. Not Tyler, not my parents, not Lauren. I flew back to Chicago, sat in my Rogers Park bedroom, and spent 3 days thinking. The first thing I understood was that money does not automatically fix what is broken. I had nearly $50 million coming to me, and my children were still sleeping in a house I did not live in, being taken to Florida by the man who had dismantled my marriage. The second thing I understood was that whatever I did next would define a very long stretch of my life. I had options. Some were petty. Some were catastrophic. I am human. I had been humiliated in ways that went deep, but I kept coming back to Vivian grabbing my collar. I kept coming back to Cooper's face. Everything I did next, I did with them as the fixed point. The first call I made was to a family law attorney in Chicago. Not the one I had used during the divorce. A different firm, one of the top practices in the city. The kind I had heard about but could never previously afford. The attorney was a woman named Jennifer Hartwell. She had the reputation of being absolutely methodical and slightly frightening. I told her my situation, all of it. She was quiet for a moment. "Was the custody arrangement agreed upon in mediation or ordered by a judge?" she asked. "Agreed, technically," I said, "but agreed under circumstances where my financial position made fighting for more very difficult. Circumstances have changed, yes." "A material change in circumstances is grounds for custody modification in Illinois," she said. "If you can demonstrate stable housing, financial stability, and a genuine ability to provide a primary residence for your children, a motion to modify is reasonable." I drove to Wilmette the following Saturday for my regular visit with Vivian and Cooper. Cooper had gotten a haircut that made him look suddenly, heartbreakingly older. Vivian had learned a knock-knock joke at preschool and told it to me 4 times in a row, with the same delighted expectation each time. I held both of them for a long time before I left. Within 60 days, I purchased a 4-bedroom house in Evanston, Illinois. It was 3 miles from the Wilmette house, in the same school district, close enough that the kids' routines would not have to change significantly. I paid for it directly. No mortgage, no contingencies. Tyler helped me furnish it over a weekend. He kept looking around the rooms with an expression he was trying very hard to keep neutral. "Raymond," I said, because by then I had told him the broad strokes. "Raymond," he repeated. Then he looked at me and said, "Nathan, your uncle was secretly rich for 20 years and didn't tell anyone. He sent $50 birthday cards," I said. Tyler sat down on the floor of the empty living room and laughed until his eyes watered. I will not tell you the custody modification process was easy. There were 3 separate hearings and a guardian ad litem evaluation. Lauren argued that the modification was financially motivated, that I was using a sudden windfall to rewrite an arrangement that had been working. Jennifer Hartwell was exactly what people said she was: methodical, slightly frightening. She presented a specific picture: a father who had never missed a scheduled visit, even when his own circumstances were precarious, and who now had both the stability and the genuine desire to be a full, daily presence in his children's lives. The evaluator recommended shared physical custody alternating weeks. The judge agreed. The morning I brought Vivian and Cooper to the Evanston house for the first time, their rooms were already set up. Vivian's had the purple lamp she had specifically asked for. Cooper's had the train track that took up most of his floor. Vivian walked through the front door, looked around carefully, and then turned to me. "Daddy," she said, "is this your house?" "Our house," I said, "for when you're with me." She nodded, processing that. Then she asked, "Does it have a backyard?" "It has a big backyard." She turned around and walked toward the kitchen to find the back door, with the absolute purposeful certainty of a 4-year-old who had decided this was acceptable. I stood in my front hallway and cried. I am not going to pretend I did not. People always ask what I did about Derek. Less than you might expect. Structuring Raymond's estate transfer required making the company holdings and my ownership a matter of legal record. Financial disclosures, documentation, the kind of paperwork trail that reaches people who pay attention in small professional worlds. Word traveled through Chicago's investment community. I did not spread it. I built something instead. Briggs Capital Ventures. Offices on North Michigan Avenue. The same strategy Raymond had mastered: undervalued land in the path of long-horizon development. Sandra Cole joined as senior advisor. Tyler ran operations. Within 18 months, we had 3 significant land positions in the Phoenix area, a Texas Hill Country acquisition north of Austin, and a mixed-use development on Chicago's south side in the Rogers Park adjacent neighborhood where I had rented that $650 bedroom. That project created 80 construction jobs and restored a commercial block that had been vacant for a decade. I thought about Raymond often during that period. Derek Calloway's firm experienced what the business press called significant client attrition over the following 2 years. The last I heard, Callaway Capital Group had been absorbed in what insiders understood as a distressed sale. Lauren and I co-parent now. Functional, not friends. But Vivian and Cooper move between our houses with the adaptability of children who know they are loved in both places. And that is the outcome that matters. Last spring, Vivian turned 7. We had her birthday party in my Evanston backyard, the one with the big lawn she had approved on her first visit. It was a Saturday afternoon in May, with paper lanterns strung between the trees, a cake with 7 candles, and her school friends running through the sprinklers in a way that made the whole yard look like a movie about exactly this kind of thing. I stood at the edge of the yard watching all of it. Tyler was next to me with a beer watching too. "Your uncle knew," he said. "He knew something I said. He knew you'd be okay." I thought about Raymond, the tan, the vague stories, the 2 visits a year, the $50 cards, the 23 years of quiet, patient building in Nevada and Arizona and Colorado, all of it assembling into a thing he would never use himself. I thought about the briefcase with my name taped to it. I thought about the $60,000 he had called travel money like a man setting out a bowl of soup before a journey. I thought about my father's voice on the phone that February. Raymond always had a soft spot for you. Of all the family, you were the one he asked about. Raymond had seen something in me that I could not see in myself, from inside the life I had been living. He had waited for the moment when I would be stripped of everything that was obscuring it. Then he left me exactly what I needed. Not to be comfortable, to build. He knew, I said. Vivian ran across the yard toward me with wet feet and a piece of cake she was holding out at an angle that suggested it was not going to survive the journey. "Daddy, there's still some left," she said. "You have to eat some before it's all gone." I caught her when she reached me, one arm under her, the cake miraculously intact. "How much is left?" I asked. "Some," she said, which is the accurate and honest answer of a 7-year-old who has had more than her share. I ate the cake. The briefcase is in my home office now, on a shelf where I can see it when I am working. The letter is inside it, along with the combination lock code my father gave me on a Post-it note, and the boarding pass stub from the Scottsdale flight. Sometimes I think about what my uncle must have understood about life that I am still learning. That the things we are most sure of are often the things about to change. That loss, when it comes, can be a clearing rather than only a destruction. That sometimes the people who love us most do so from a distance we do not fully appreciate until they are gone. Raymond Briggs never got rich in the way people imagine when they hear that number. He got rich the way anyone gets anywhere meaningful, slowly, patiently, without anyone watching, building something one piece at a time with a fixed point in mind. The fixed point was me. I did not know it, but he did. And when everything I had built on other people's foundations finally began to collapse, the thing Raymond had built in silence was already waiting beneath me.